Welcome to the Eat Your Greens with Dr. Black podcast. This show is all about helping you get healthier with delicious, whole food, plant-based nutrition, and sustainable lifestyle habits that actually fit into your real life. I'm Dr. Black. I'm a board-certified pediatrician, a lifestyle medicine physician, and an all-around foodie. Here's an old joke for you. Let me know if you've heard it before. What type of room has no walls? Naturally, that would be a mushroom. And that's the topic of today's episode. Mushrooms. Those mysterious, savory little wonders that people love to eat all kinds of ways, whether it's stuffed, whether you toss them on your salad, your pizza, you can make them into stroganoff, soup, and my favorite way, stir fries. Mushrooms are valued for their umami flavor, their chewy texture, and their versatility. Personally, I love mushrooms, but I know not everyone does. I mean, honestly, in my opinion, for the people who don't like mushrooms, I really think it just comes down to never having had them cooked just the right way. Do you know what I'm saying? Here's a story for you. I recently had the opportunity to visit New Orleans. Fun fact, that's the place of my birth. I was born there. My mom's side of the family is all from there, going generations back. I happened to be in town for a conference, and maybe you've heard about Louisiana po' boys. They are next level delicious. There's just something different about an authentic Louisiana po' boy. Usually you get them in a hole-in-the-wall, little dingy place, often associated with a gas station. And in the past, I would always get the fried oyster po' boy. Well, I just happened to find this place in the quarter called Two Fat Vegans. That's the number 2, PHAT, vegans. And I ordered their fried mushroom po' boy. My mind was blown. If I was blindfolded and you told me it was a fried oyster po' boy, I would have believed you. So if you're ever in the quarter, look for Two Fat Vegans. That sandwich could make anyone love mushrooms. I guarantee it. This is not a sponsored review, but hey, I'm thinking I might have to let the owner of Two Fat Vegans know that I gave them a shout out. Maybe next time I'm in NOLA, I'll get a free sandwich. What do you think? Is it worth a try? Before I get into the body of the episode, I do want to say a quick word on pronunciation. You will hear the word spelled Fungi pronounced a number of ways. Some people say fungi, others fungi, some people fungi. When I was in medical school, our microbiology professor explained it this way. He was a fungi, and the plural of fungus is fungi. Before doing this episode, I did look it up, and it turns out that the pronunciation really just varies based on what part of the world you live in. So pretty much any way you say it, you're probably fine. But out of habit and nostalgia for the good old medical school days, I will be pronouncing it fungi for the rest of this episode. All right, whether it's the hallucinogenic properties, the deadly poisonous varieties, or even those weird ones that can make ants and maybe even larger animals into zombies, we've all heard some really wild tales about the power of mushrooms. Now, while all of that is interesting and it probably merits a future episode, this is a nutrition-focused podcast, and so today I'll be talking about the culinary variety of mushrooms. I'm going to talk a little bit, of course, about their health benefits, give you some science about them, and some really wild mushroom trivia that might just blow your mind. To start, there have been more than 10,000 species of mushrooms described, and probably there are millions more than that have yet to be classified. Most don't taste good, they're inedible, and many are actually toxic. In fact, of those 10,000 or more, only about 100 species of mushrooms are considered edible. And of those 100, only about 50 or so are actively cultivated for food or medicine. Some of the other 50 may be foraged and consumed locally in a variety of cultures around the world, especially in areas of Asia, Eastern Europe, and parts of Africa and South America. Now, of those 50 actively cultivated species, only about 10 or 12 are actually widely available in supermarkets in the United States. And to be honest, if you live in a smaller town like I do, that number goes down to closer to even 5 or 6. you'll probably recognize some of these. There's your oyster mushroom, there's shiitake, enoki, maitake, lion's mane, straw mushroom, a wood ear, which is also called black fungus, porcini, chanterelles, and morels. There's even something called a snow fungus, which apparently is used in desserts. I'm going to have to go back and look that one up because I've actually never heard of it before researching this episode. I really am curious about what kind of dessert you can make from a fungus. If you happen to know, or if you've tasted a snow fungus dessert, let me know. You can send me a text by clicking the link at the top of the show notes, or you can also just always send me a message via the contact page on the Eat Greens with Dr. Black website. So if you know, reach out. I want to hear about it. Now, you can probably guess what the most widely available type of mushroom is, especially in the States. Of course, that's the humble white button mushroom. But did you notice I left a couple very popular types off the list? What about crimini and portobello mushrooms? It turns out button, crimini, and portobello are just different stages of the Agaricus bisporus mushroom. So the white button stage is harvested the earliest, and it's a little small, firm mushroom with a smooth texture and kind of a mild, slightly nutty flavor. That's what we always get on our salads, our pizzas, things like that. Criminis are harvested just a little bit later, so they're a little firmer than the button mushrooms. They have a deeper, little bit earthier, more umami flavor. Sometimes they're called baby bellas because basically they're the teenage form of the mature mushroom, the portobello. A fully mature portobello is very large. It has a dark brown cap, and the texture is really dense and meaty with a rich, bold, almost beefy flavor. So a lot of times people will grill it, they stuff it, or they'll just use it as a plant-based burger alternative just because of that hearty texture and really meaty flavor. So those three, button, crimini, portobello, they're all stages of development of the fruiting body. The fruiting body is the part of the fungus that we call the mushroom, the part that we usually eat. However, there is a lot more to mushrooms than meets the eye. So let's take a minute to learn just a little bit about the structure and the life cycle of these super fun fungi. To start with, mushrooms reproduce via spores. Spores are microscopic. They are carried by the wind, they're carried by animals on their fur, or even over water. And when spores land in a favorable environment, someplace really moist, rich, and warm, they germinate and they grow into something called a hypha. Hypha is a thread-like filament. The plural is hyphae. As these hyphae grow, they start branching, they become bigger, and they form what's called a mycelial network. That's an underground web of these little filaments that break down the organic matter in the soil and feed the fungus. This is really the main body of the fungus, and it can live on for decades, hidden deep in the soil, in decaying wood, and in compost. So after a while, when the conditions are right, the temperature, moisture, oxygen level, all of that is just right, that mycelium sends up a fruiting body. That's that mushroom that we harvest and eat. This structure really only exists just long enough to mature and release more spores, starting that cycle all over again. So although traditionally we have only used that fruiting body as a food source, more recently, mycelia are being grown and used to make meat substitutes. They're high in fiber, they're actually a pretty good protein source, and the mycelia actually have a nice umami flavor. They can actually be grown really quickly with a much smaller environmental footprint compared to, say, animal agriculture and even soy agriculture. And there are companies out there like Meaty, there's one called My Forest Foods, and another Nature's Find that grow pure mycelia in a controlled environment. And then they use this high-protein kind of fibrous product that mimics the texture of chicken and steak to make their meat replacement product. I did happen to try the Meaty brand. It's carried by our local grocery store. I tried their little steak product, and it was fine. The texture was a bit chewier than some of the other beef substitutes out there, and the flavor was pretty good. I'll probably buy it again if I really want a steak-like entree, or maybe even to cut up and put into a stew, something like that. I think it would hold up well in that kind of a dish. So let's move on to discuss the health benefits of mushrooms. To begin with, they're actually one of the only food sources of vitamin D. So outside of getting it from a supplement, we mostly get our vitamin D by making it ourselves from sun exposure. Mushrooms actually do the same thing. They make their own vitamin D when exposed to UV light, whether that's from the sun or from a grow light. They're also good sources of B vitamins, especially riboflavin, that's B2, niacin, which is B3, and pantothenic acid, which is B5. So if you want some energy, try eating some mushrooms. They also contain minerals like selenium, copper, potassium, and phosphorus. Now, mushrooms actually contain some unique nutrients that are not found in other types of food. To start with, many mushrooms contain beta-glucans. This is a type of prebiotic fiber and biologically active polysaccharide that has both direct and indirect health benefits. Beta-glucans have been shown to modulate the immune system by enhancing the activity of cells like macrophage and natural killer cells. They help lower cholesterol levels by reducing absorption and increasing excretion of cholesterol. And they also slow gastric emptying, which helps with blood sugar regulation and may even help to prevent cancer. As I said, they're a type of soluble fiber, which means that they're digested by the bacteria in the colon, and they support a healthy, diverse gut microbiome. If you don't already know how important the bacteria living in your gut are, please go back and listen to some of my other episodes. Let's just say that the state of your intestinal microbiota affects pretty much every other aspect of your health, from your digestion to your metabolic health, your immune health, and even your mental health. Many mushrooms are also rich in antioxidants, and they exert a strong anti-inflammatory effect. They're particularly high in an antioxidant called ergothioneine, and this is thought to be part of the reason that people who eat more fungi have lower rates of breast and other types of cancer. Ergothioneine may also protect against neurodegeneration, or also called cognitive decline, so can help protect your brain. And there is really good evidence to support this anti-inflammatory effect, especially from mushrooms like reishi and turkey tail. And of course, it's no secret that mushrooms have been valued for their medicinal benefits for centuries. In fact, you probably already know the OG antibiotic, penicillin, was discovered in a common bread mold. Mold is also a type of fungus. Also, the immunosuppressant medication cyclosporine, which basically made organ transplants possible, is also derived from a fungus. I always like to include a bit of historical background and weird trivia in my episodes, and fungi offer up a wealth of interesting tidbits. Did you know the largest living organism on Earth? It's not a whale, it's a mushroom. The honey fungus, also called, let's see if I can say this right, Armillaria ostoye, something like that, in Oregon, spans over 3.5 miles underground, and it's more than 2,000 years old. The largest mushroom ever grown was a portobello mushroom back in 2014. It came in at just a few ounces shy of 7 pounds. That's a lot of mushroom. A 5,300-year-old frozen mummy found in the Alps was noted to be carrying 2 types of mushrooms with it. One is thought to have been used for medicinal use and the other as tinder, so they go way back. Now, have you ever heard of a fairy ring? A fairy ring is a natural ring of mushrooms that's connected by underground mycelia, and they're associated with a lot of folk tales and myths. They can vary in size quite a bit, but the largest fairy ring was found in France. It was over 2,000 feet, that's 600 meters, in diameter, and it is estimated to be about 700 years old. In traditional Chinese medicine, reishi, or also called lingzhi, mushrooms have been used for over 2,000 years to promote vitality and longevity. In fact, they are so well established with longevity that the ancient Egyptian royalty called them the plants of immortality, and they forbade commoners from eating them. We wouldn't want those commoners living too long, now would we? Another thing you may have already heard is that mushrooms are thought to be able to talk to each other. Recent studies suggest that those mycelial networks use electrical impulses, sort of like nerve impulses, and that may serve as a form of communication. Some people have even compared it a little bit to like a fungal internet, like Facebook for fungi. Now, the weirdest fact of all, even though we often lump mushrooms in with vegetables as a food category, although, I don't know, maybe we should call them a fruit since we usually eat the fruiting body, they're technically more like animals than plants. Here's why. Do you remember studying photosynthesis in your middle school biology class? Plants use chlorophyll to convert sunlight into energy. You may have noticed that fungi aren't green. This is because they don't have chlorophyll and they can't photosynthesize. Instead, as I said earlier, they get their energy by eating, quote unquote, eating organic matter just like animals do. Those mycelia are taking up that organic matter from the soil. Plants store the energy they make from the sun in the form of starch. Think like potatoes and fruit. Fungi and animals both store energy in the form of glycogen. That's a carbohydrate that in humans is found in the liver and muscle cells. Another thing you might recall about plants is that they take in carbon dioxide and they release oxygen. But mushrooms do the opposite. They take in oxygen and release carbon dioxide, which is the same thing that we do when we breathe. So again, more and more evidence that they're more like animals than veggies. Here's another difference. Plants have cell walls made of cellulose. The cell walls of fungi are made of chitin. That's the same tough material that's found in insect exoskeletons and crustacean shells. So in a sense, you could say mushrooms are more similar to crabs than they are to kale. Now, back when I was taking biology in college, we still used the old kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species system to classify living organisms. Now that we have better technology to analyze the genetic code, a lot has changed. And it turns out that genetically speaking, fungi are more closely related to animals than to plants, and they're now placed with animals within the same supergroup called Opisthokonta, rather than in with the plant kingdom like they used to be. So when you look at the DNA, fungi share a more recent common ancestor with humans than they do with any plant. Now, they may not be plants, but mushrooms can still be found stocking the produce aisle. I guess since this is a nutrition podcast, I would be remiss if I neglected to talk about some of the ways that people love to eat mushrooms. Naturally, there's that rich cream of mushroom soup, although often I wonder if really the only way people actually use this is to make green bean casserole at Thanksgiving. Other beloved recipes include creamy mushroom stroganoff and risotto. I love mushroom risotto. And of course, you can often find them sautéed for a topping for your steak or your burger, and they're also commonly used to make gravy. One of my very favorite vegan food vloggers makes a steak out of a lion's mane mushroom by pressing it between two cast iron skillets. I plan to try this out as soon as I remember to borrow a second cast iron skillet from my dad, because I only have one. So eventually I'll get around to that. Maybe I'll do one of those taste testing episodes where I make a bunch of mushroom dishes and invite some friends over. We'll see. Those are always fun. If you go to the show notes on the Eat Greens with Dr. Black website, you can find links not only to that YouTube video from the food vlogger, Derek Sarno is his name, but also a couple of my other favorite recipes from some food blogs that I follow. I always throw out the caveat that I personally am not a food blogger. I don't develop recipes. I pretty much just scour the internet and find things that I like, and then I pass them on to you. To be honest, I really don't think you can go wrong. You can add mushrooms to just about any dish you're making. You can use them to add some umami flavor, a little chewy texture, and also to bulk up any meat-based dish so that, first of all, it goes farther and you can save money on your grocery bill because we all know how expensive meat is these days. To bring out the best flavor and texture in mushrooms, be sure when you're cooking them, don't overcrowd your pan. They really need a lot of space to brown. This is because they contain a lot of water. So if you cook too many at once, they're just going to steam instead of caramelize. This might be another reason that some people just don't like mushrooms. They are just not being cooked properly. If you do use any kind of oil, just use a tiny bit, or even consider doing a dry saute with just a little splash of like broth. This is because mushrooms are almost like a sponge and they're going to soak a lot of that oil up, making the dish too greasy if you overdo it. So if you're one of those mushroom skeptical kind of people, preparation really does matter. Try just doing a really thin slice, and then you can roast these until they're crispy, and that can really be a game changer. Another thing is just to make sure you chop them up really finely. If it's more of a texture issue, big chunks of the chewy mushroom can be a little much for some people. Personally, my number one way to use mushrooms is in stir fries. I like to combine a more delicate shroom like enoki with a chewier shiitake. It's my favorite combination in a stir fry. I just can't encourage people enough to try to be open-minded and keep giving them a try. I truly believe that there is a mushroom dish out there that will convert even the most staunch fungiphobe into a chanterelle champion. Or maybe an enoki enthusiast? How about a portobello proponent? Mushroom maven? Sorry, I'll stop there. All right, let's recap what we've learned today. Yes, I went there. Mushrooms are fungi, doesn't matter, however you say it. You now know that they're more closely related to animals than vegetables, and that we typically eat the fruiting body. That's the part we call the mushroom. But the biggest part of fungi is the underground mycelial network, which can also be grown for food. We learned about the life cycle of the typical fungus, and that button, cremini, and portobellos are actually all the same mushroom, just harvested at different stages of growth. Culinary mushrooms are delicious, they're nutritious, and surprisingly diverse. They're one of the few dietary sources of vitamin D. They're rich in B vitamins, minerals, fiber, and unique antioxidants like ergothioneine. And compounds found in mushrooms have been shown to support immunity, heart health, cognitive function, and even can prevent cancer. So don't forget, I have linked a few of my favorite mushroom recipes in the show notes, including that one that uses lion's mane mushrooms for steak. Head to www.eatgreenswithdrblack.com to check them out. And of course, while you're there, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. You'll get an email whenever I release a new episode, delivered straight to your inbox, so you'll never miss out on what's coming next. Hopefully, this episode gets an okie dokie from you. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to eat your greens. Please be aware that this podcast provides general health information about nutrition and feeding of infants and children and is meant for educational purposes only. It's not intended to replace the important relationship between a parent, child, and pediatrician. If you have concerns about your child's nutrition, health, or growth, please consult your doctor.